Power creep is a bitch, and no Pokemon knows this better than the ones we're going to talk about today. These Pokemon used to dominate OU, and these are the Pokemon that shaped the entire metagame, at least at one point, and now they've been left in the dust by modern day competition. In this video, I'm going to be going over Pokemon that fell off so hard from competitive viability that they aren't even mentioned today. We're going to be going over why these Pokemon are no longer viable, and then we're going to be giving them fair buffs that'll hopefully bring them back into the competitive spotlight, or at least make them somewhat more viable. We're going to start it off with a Pokemon that's kind of still viable, but he's in like a phase of falling off. Let me explain. The Tyranitar was and is still somewhat of an OU staple. From Gen 2 all the way through Gen 7, this Pokemon defined Weather Wars, and he was the best pursuit trapper ever created. And he was a cornerstone of every bulky and offensive sand team for literally 20 years. But in Gen 8 and Gen 9, Tyranitar fell to one of the lowest points in its entire competitive history, and is currently sitting in UU, which is absolutely tragic for a Pokemon like this. The first and biggest reason is power creep, obviously, so modern Pokemon are just a lot faster, stronger, and have better coverage than anything from Tyranitar's era. New fighting type Pokemon like Great Tusk, Iron Valiant, and Zamazenta absolutely destroy T-Tar, and the meta is dominated by fast hitting, hard hitting breakers that Tyranitar is just too slow to keep up with. Tyranitar has 7 weaknesses, including a 4 times weakness to fighting, which is one of the most common attacking types in competitive, and close combat is literally everywhere. Earthquake, Headlong Rush are also really common ground type moves that mess up T-Tar. These obviously also fairy types like Fluttermane and Iron Valiant, who are also very dominant right now, and then obviously him being a dark type also makes him weak to U-turn, which is one of the most common moves in competitive as well. So for a Pokemon that's entire functionality is being bulky, having basically half the meta be comprised of moves that are strong against you is kind of crippling, I'm not gonna lie. The start of his fall off was the removal of Pursuit in Gen 8, which was probably the biggest nerf T-Tar's hit in its entire history. For 20 years, Tyranitar could trap Latios, Gengar, Starmie, and Celebi, and it could punish switches and control the pace of the game. Without Pursuit, Tyranitar no longer threatens what it used to. Hazard and chip damage are also more brutal than ever. Tyranitar has no recovery moves, and it's weak to common hazard setters, and it gets worn down by knockoff constantly. In a meta where Goldengo prevents Defog, Tyranitar gets chipped down extremely fast. And finally, Tyranitar faces heavy competition from better rock types and better dark types. Tinglu is obviously a great example of this. He's a mixed wall with better hazards. Garganacl has fewer weaknesses and better longevity. King Gambit is a better dark type sweeper, and Clodsire provides better special bulk with an actual recovery move. How to buff Tyranitar. The best buff I feel like Tyranitar could get is Regenerator. This would fix its longevity issue completely and let it pivot without dying. With a Regenerator, Tyranitar heals 33% of its HP on switch out, which synergizes perfectly with his 4 switches and huge bulk. This would instantly put Tyranitar back into OU. Another option is a new ability that I'm making up right now called Sand Shield, and this reduces damage from fighting in ground type moves by 25% in Sandstorm, and this directly addresses Tyranitar's biggest weakness while making sand teams viable again. And it is balanced somewhat because it's obviously conditional, so you do need to run a Sand Setter with this because T-Tar will no longer have Sandstorm. For stat buffs, I think bringing its speed from 61 to 76 would help it outspeed many slow pivots and make it way more threatening, or giving it like 20 plus defense to help surviving, fighting, and ground type moves better, because a lot of them are physical and T-Tar is a special defender. Obviously, we're not going to give it both things, it's just like one or the other. Giving Tyranitar recover or shore up or like another reliable recovery move would also help it, because again it is a tanky Pokemon, and being a tank that's really slow and not having a recovery move really puts Tyranitar in a pretty bad spot. Obviously it can run leftovers, but I feel like an optimal buff that would still keep T-Tar somewhat balanced would be giving it Regenerator, Knockoff, and Body Press as new moves plus the new ability, giving it like a 10 plus buff in the speed that might be a bit overkill, and maybe a 90 base power rock stat move to fix the issue with Stone Edge having slightly inconsistent accuracy. Blissy used to be the special wall in competitive Pokemon with 255 HP and 135 defense, or special defense, my bad. It could tank literally any attack in the game. For generations, Blissy was mandatory on defensive teams. But in Gen 9, Blissy has fallen to RU and barely sees any usage at all nowadays. I think it does have like a bit of usage in OU, but it's very lackluster. The main reason is the rise of strong physical attackers that completely ignore Blissy's special bulk. With only 10 base defense, Blissy gets destroyed by any physical move. And modern OU is dominated by great physical attackers like Great Tusk, King Gambit, and Iron Valiant, all of whom I'm pretty sure all of them have stat moves that also mess up Bristly. Fighting type coverage is literally everywhere, like the Pokemon that I just mentioned, and close combat can easily OHKO Blissey from full HP, and it could literally be any Pokemon that uses this move. Like, it's actually just, yeah. Existence of more flexible special walls like Clefable, Slowking, Galar, and Tinglu also hurt Blissey. These Pokemon can handle special attacks while providing offensive pressure. Though, like, obviously Pokemon like Clefable and I think Slowking Galar is a bit better, but like, some of these Pokemon that I mentioned aren't even OU threats themselves, and they're obviously outclassing Blissey. And Blissey used to be the main Pokemon in OU back like, I think like Gen 2, Gen 3. I forgot when competitive was first introduced. Power creep and wall breaking also made Blissey less effective. Modern special attackers like Iron Moth, Fluttermane, and Roaring Moon hit it so hard that even Blissey's massive special bulk isn't enough to reliably wall them. A Choice Black's Moonblast from Fluttermane does like 40 to 55% of its HP, and for a Pokemon that's entire purpose is to tank special hits, it's just not enough, I'm not gonna lie. The single best buff Blissey could get is the ability Regenerator, but we already gave that to T-Tar, and I feel like giving Regenerator to a Pokemon like Blissey would just be overkill. It genuinely would be too overpowered. So instead of giving it a new ability, I'm gonna have to give it some stat buffs. Increasing Blissey's physical defense stat by 20 to 30 would bring its base from 10 to about 30 to 40, and this is still terrible defense, but it's still enough to survive some neutral physical hits and not get OHKO'd by everything. I think the best buff Blissey could honestly get is just a good buff to its defense stat so it isn't so one-dimensional. In order to balance this out, I would recommend taking 55 stats from its HP and putting that into its defense. So it has 200 HP and 65 defense, which obviously 65 defense is still pretty mediocre, but it should be enough to give Blissey some more survivability against physical attackers, because at this state, Pokemon that aren't even super effective are able to chip it down like OHKO or 2KO it with strong physical attacks. So this gives it a lot better survivability and versatility. And the next thing that we really need to do is touch up upon its moveset. Along with those stat buffs, lowering its HP by 55 also gives me another idea. I'm gonna give Blissey a brand new exclusive move called... Okay, my first thought was Smush, but I feel like that just sounds wrong. So it's basically like Body Slam, except the calculation isn't like your attack stat. Instead, it's calculated on your HP difference. So since we've lowered Blissey's HP and it doesn't have like a staggering 255 and only 200, I think this would be a lot more balanced. And basically, Blissey now gains the ability to actually have some sort of offensive presence. Like, obviously this move isn't going to be doing insane amounts of damage, but it's going to be similar to Seismic Toss, where the move's damage is calculated off of your HP difference. Now, this might be really broken in usage and just seem fine to me in theory. Like, comment below, because I genuinely just could not think of anything, and I feel like this would be a really funny ability. But yeah, let's move on. The next Pokemon we're going to be going over is Gyarados, and Gyarados is obviously one of the most iconic Pokemon in the entire series, and it was OU viable from Gen 1 all the way up to Gen 7. With Dragon Dance, Intimidate, and great offensive stats, Gyarados was a setup sweeper that could snowball games. But in Gen 8 and Gen 9, Gyarados has fallen to the UU and RU in some formats. The loss of Mega Gyarados hurt it really badly. Mega Gyarados was a Dark and Water type instead of Dark and Flying, which gave it way better offensive options and the ability Mold Breaker to bypass abilities. The biggest problem with Gyarados is the fact that it just has terrible stab coverage. Gyarados is Water and Flying, but it only has Waterfall and Bounce as physical stab moves. Bounce is 85 power, and with 85 accuracy and a charge turn, it's basically just unusable most of the time. Without a reliable flying type physical move, Gyarados just struggles to do significant damage to Pokemon that resist water. Grass types, water types, and dragon types all wall Gyarados because of Bounce. Gyarados also has a 4x weakness to electric, which is another pretty common type. The rise of bulky grass types like Rillaboom, Amoonguss, and Wuxian also really hurt Gyarados a lot. These Pokemon completely wall Gyarados and can cripple it with status effects or just phase it out with Dragon Tail. Gyarados can't break through them without Ice Fang, which is just weak, and it forces Gyarados to give up coverage. 81 base speed is also mediocre in modern OU, because even after a Dragon Dance boost, Gyarados only hits 162 speed, which still gets outsped by Choice Scarf users and naturally fast threats like Iron Valiant and Fluttermane and Iron Boulder. I feel like the best buff Gyarados could get is giving it a strong flying type move. Giving Gyarados Brave Bird, Dual Wing Beat, or even like a signature 90 base power flying move with 100% accuracy like Tidal Gust. Bro, Gyarados getting a flying type signature move is just so hype. I feel like this should just actually happen. It would easily bring this Pokemon back up. Like, it might not be OU viable because I'm not gonna lie, bro, current metagame just does not allow Gyarados. I mean, like, maybe, low-key. 50-50 on this, but I just feel like giving it a good flying type move would just fix a lot of its issues, because now it can deal with grass types that would normally mess it up. Like I just feel like this is a great buff, and it's just a simple way to fix it. So I'm gonna go ahead and give you guys some more suggestions. Comment below which one you would do. The next option is to just change its type, similar to the Mega, which the Mega Gyarados is dark and water. We're gonna change it up to water and dragon, which has been suggested since forever because Gyarados is literally based on a dragon. Water and Dragon removes its 4 times weakness to Electric, and since Gyarados doesn't even have any flying type stab moves, it doesn't really lose out on anything, and it also gives Gyarados access to Dragon type stab, and for some reason, even though it's a flying type, it actually does get access to really good Dragon moves like Claw and Outrage. The downside is Water and Dragon adds a Fairy weakness, but that's way more manageable than its 4 times Electric weakness, and it also removes the Ground immunity, which does suck, but overall Water and Dragon is just a way better offensive typing, and Gyarados is an offensive Pokemon. So you want to prioritize being good offensively rather defensively with a Pokemon like this. If we want to go the basic, boring, and probably overpowered stat buffing route, we'd probably just give it like a 10 to 15 buff to its speed, bringing it up to like 91, 96. This lets it outspeed a lot more Pokemon naturally, and the Dragon Dance boost that it actually gets hits a lot harder. I don't know why I said like actually gets, like it's because Gyarados always runs Dragon Dance, so like you always want to set up with it. So now when you set up with it, it'll actually be a lot more impactful, and sometimes you won't get messed up by Pokemon that just naturally outspeed you. All of these Pokemon dominated competitive for generations and deserve better than being stuck in UU or RU. With these buffs, they could return to OU without being completely broken, and they'd just be viable again. If you guys made it to the end, comment which of these buffs you think is the most needed. Make sure to like and subscribe, and see you.